Welcome to the Sumo Logic Sumo Administration Certification class. My name is John Meredith, and I will be your instructor for this session. As I said, we do record these classes. In a few minutes, I will show you where you can find recordings of these or any of our classes, although many of you have heard over the last couple of days what classes and stuff, where we can find that information. But I'll show you again anyway, because a couple of you are new. One of the question was asked earlier, and I think it's a really good question. The question is, what other classes and stuff do we have coming up? And so the week of December 7th, 8th, and 9th, which happens to be a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we will do metric mastery on the 7th. We will do observability fundamentals on the 8th. And we will do observability administration on the 9th. So we have those three classes coming up in December. And then in January, we'll do a security analytics, security monitoring and analytics class, the Cloud SIEM fundamentals class, and the Cloud SIEM admin class. So that's to give you an idea of what's happening. Again, this is kind of an interesting time due to the holidays and all the other things that, are going on. All right, so let's get this party started. Again, our game plan here is, and actually this agenda is a little off. We are going to talk about downloading some files we need for lab 1, and we're going to talk about data collection and setting up data collectors and metadata. Then we'll do 3 labs where we set up a collector and 2 different sources. Now, for those of you who cannot install software on your computers, or you don't want to install software on your computers, that's not a problem. You can just watch me go through those labs and basically see how that goes. Then we'll talk a bit about optimization tools. We'll talk about overview of administration setup, creating users and groups and roles and all that good stuff. We'll talk about we'll do some hands-on labs here to install some apps. Now, you notice it says here, hands-on lab 4 and 6. There's no lab 5. Actually, there is a lab 5. If you hadn't had any of our other courses, Lab 5 has you go back to the fundamentals class and do the labs from that class. So like I said, for most of you, I know you're in fundamentals, so we'll probably skip that. I do expect this class to actually run pretty close to on time, where we will have 2 hours of lecture and lab, and we will get done to the examination at about 1 o'clock East Coast time. So the other classes ran a little long. This class shouldn't run that long. If it runs long, it'll be run long by about 5 minutes. So that's the game plan. Again, want to remind you all that we're running a special promotion right now, and some of you are the lucky recipients of it. I know I've seen the emails. If you take, after this class, you take the certification exam and you pass it, okay, then you can send a copy of the certificate to an email, training@sumologic.com, requesting your Uber Eats voucher, and we will send you an Uber Eats voucher for $15. So the point is if you take the exam and pass it today, why not get a free lunch on us? I'm not sure if $15 will cover a lunch, but hey, anything helps, right? So basically, like I said, you send the email, you take your certificate, and I'll show you where you get your certificate, those of you not familiar, and we'll send it to training@sumologic.com and get a voucher. So most of you are aware of this. The other thing we're doing is for those of you in the US and Canada, we are also doing a special promotion by the end of this year. If you complete 6 Sumo certifications, we will, and there's 10 actual total, but 6 out of the 10, we will actually send you a backpack. Now you may ask, well, what if I'm in Europe or what if I'm someplace else? There's 2 problems with that. One's the shipping costs are typically more expensive than the price of the backpack. And more importantly, what really I find a little frustrating is you got to pay import tax. So you got to pay tax on this item, which I think is kind of unfair. We're giving you a gift. We don't want you to have to pay tax. So that's that promotion. And again, if you find yourself where you've completed 6 certifications, if you want, you can just email me and I'll give you my contact information just a little bit. And I will send you the link to the form, and then you can fill out the form. We'll verify that you've got the 6 certifications. We'll send you the backpack. Pretty simple. Okay. I'm going to skip this for right now. And the first order of business, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to log right into the Sumo Logic training environment. And we're going to log in with a different account this time. So you're going to log in with a bit of administrative privileges. So let me, first of all, copy this information. Let me go in here in my chat. And let's go ahead and paste that information in. So first thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you to fire up Google Chrome or Firefox. And I'd like you to go to service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. And you can see it just automatically logged me in. I'll fix that here in just a second. Right now I'm typing in my contact information into the chat box. So I'm going to log out of here. And so this should be what you see. You see where they want you to log in. Now, next thing I want you to do is I want you to pick a 3-digit number. For those of you who've been with me for the last 2 days, you can take that same 3-digit number that you had before and type it in the chat box. That way I can make sure there's not too much duplication here. A little duplication is okay. A lot of duplications could be a problem. So I see people are typing in their numbers. Thank you very much. And then you're going to log in as training plus admin, not analyst, but admin with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. So training plus admin with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then the password is not that. That's an old password. It is thanks 21 exclamation mark. I'm not sure if it's in honor of Thanksgiving that they chose that password, or it's thanks for you guys being such terrific customers. But that's the password. And this password will last the whole month of November. The first Monday of December, we'll change the password again. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go ahead and log in. Okay. I'm going to log in with my credentials so I don't take up a number here. And log into the training environment there. And I've got full administrative rights. You guys have partial administrative rights. So I've got complete rights. And the reason is I can show you some things that we'll get into and play around with here in just a little bit. But I'd like you all to go ahead and log in. And when you log in, please raise your hand. So in that reaction button there, you have the option to raise your hand. That way I know that you're all in, you're all logged in, and we are in good shape and we are good to go. And I see a bunch of folks have joined us. So let me also enable some microphones here. Welcome, folks. Again, the reason I'm enabling your microphones is if you've got a question, you can ask them directly. And for those of you who have been with me earlier this week, know that I am all about the questions. So feel free to ask your questions. That is our goal, to help you out. So I'm just enabling here the buttons here, and we should be good to go. All right. All right. So again, when you all get logged in, now if you're having problems logging in, please let me know. Okay. So if you're having problems, you're not able to log in, please let me know that. That's probably more important than the hands. And just so you know, out of 35 students, I have 24 of you who have indicated, or 25 of you who've indicated you're all logged in. And that's pretty good. That's about what I expect. I expect somehow the day job to kind of get in your way. So, and again, for those of you who are just late in joining us, just to reiterate, this time you're going to go out to service.sumologic.com as you did before, if you've had the other classes this week. But this time you're going to log in with a different account. This time you're going to log in with training plus admin with a 3-digit number. So I am going to re-put this information in the chat box in case anybody needs it. So again, you're going to go to service.sumologic.com. You're going to log in as training plus admin with that 3-digit number. You randomly pick a 3-digit number anywhere from 001 to 999 at sumologic.com. And then the password is thanks with a capital T, 21 exclamation mark. And this will give you access to our training environment and also give you the ability to do things like create a collector and things along those lines. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the hands. Looks like we're all in good shape. Again, if you're having any problems logging in, please let me know. Additionally, I am going to stop my video sharing here, turn my camera off. So just to save some bandwidth. And I'm going to answer the first question that was asked earlier right now. And the question is, where can I get a hold of the recordings, right? And for those of you who've been with me this week, you know that when you log into any Sumo Logic environment, it could be our training environment, could be your company's environment, makes no difference. You're going to open up this navigation panel. So over here on the left where it says Sumo Logic, and you've got this hamburger menu, or just call it a stack of pancakes. And don't ask me why things relate to food for me. It's probably not a healthy conversation. But if you click on it, it will open up the navigation panel. And then down here is our main menu. And in our main menu, if you click on Help, and as many of you know, if you click on Community, this takes you to our Sumo Logic community, where we, our partners, our customers all collaborate, share ideas, and all that good stuff. And if I search for the word slides, SLIDES, you will get a return here. Actually, you get two returns. This is our courses, our webinars, and our slides. This one down here is for a welcome webinar, an hour workshop that we do, okay? Not a big deal. This one up here is the one that you want to click on. And if I copy it and I paste it and put it in the chat box so you guys can have it, there is that link. You can bookmark it, whatever. But here you can see all of our courses. And for all of our courses, here we are in the administration class. You can see the link to the labs. You can see a link to a recording of this class, and you can see a link to the slides. Okay. And that's true for any of our courses. They're all here. So as I said, next month on December 7th, we'll teach metric mastery. December 8th, we will teach this new observability fundamentals class. And on December 9th, we will teach the observability administration class, where we configure and set up tracing and all kinds of other cool stuff.
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Ronald. So when I clicked on the search mastery from yesterday, it does have a recording in there, but it's not the one that you made. It's some other guy teaching it.
You're correct. You're correct. I am told that our operations folks are going to send you links to the classes. So you guys should get an email following up. If that doesn't happen, real simple. And when I say it doesn't happen by, say, close of business today. Okay. So tomorrow, send me an email and I'll send you the links. Okay. So if you want the actual classes that we did yesterday or the day before, feel free. If you don't see them, and I'm not sure why that part of the system is breaking down, but just send me an email and I'll send you the links. Does that answer your question, Ronald?
Yeah, thank you very much.
No problem. No problem. And again, in case anybody needs it, contact information is going into the chat box. There you go. Okay. All right. So that's where you can find out this information. And again, you know, somebody pointed out, well, you know, we're not doing classes until December. So during that time, if you want to, you can take any of these classes kind of on your own. Additionally, I'll mention this again here. If I go into where our certification courses are, and I'll do this later at the end of the class, I go to home certification, and I click get certified, and I go into our learning management system, and I'll show you this later. But in our certification management system, you will find that if I go into any of these tiles, typically we have a self-paced course that you can go through as well. And I hope this takes longer than 2 minutes. It should take about 120 minutes or so. So we have self-paced courses in there that you can take. Also, additionally, I don't think I've mentioned this, and I apologize for not mentioning it. We also have a bunch of micro learnings. So if you go out to YouTube and you do a search for Sumo Logic, you'll find we got a whole channel out there with a bunch of 5 to 10 minute videos on a bunch of different things. And so you'll find that also probably very helpful. Okay. All right. So that takes care of that. Now, one thing I did want to do, and I forgot to do it, bear with me a second. I want to go into and get our labs. Again, I could go back here, back in the community, do my search and find that labs link for administration. But I also know that our labs are part of our documentation. So if I click here on help and I click on documentation, this will take me into our Sumo Logic documentation, our doc hub. And here I have everything broken out into various chapters. But specifically what I want in the Start Here chapter, you'll see there's a link here that says Quick Start Labs and Tutorials. And if I click on Quick Start Labs and Tutorials, I'll see that here are all the labs for all of our courses. And if I click on Administration, there are the 6 labs that we are going to do. Now, I'm going to tell you there's a lot more information I have than just talking about 6 labs. So the labs are fairly easy. The labs are fairly, straightforward. We'll get through those. But the point is that we'll actually get into a lot more conversation than just this. But I would like you, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put this in the chat box. I would like you to go to that link, and I would like you, if you're like running Google Chrome or someplace where you can pin this, I'd like you to pin that. And I'd also like you to pin your Sumo Logic environment so you can easily switch back and forth. Okay. And that way they're kind of out of your way and make it easy for you. So any problems or questions so far? All right. Now, before I get into the background about collectors and sources and stuff like that, I do want us to jump into Lab 1. And so here in our administration class, here in Lab 1, there's a couple things we need to download, and I want to give you time to download them. They're not big downloads, okay? And again, in Lab 1, 2, and 3, we are going to install a collector on your computer, and we are going to install 2 sources using your computer. Now, if for some reason you can't do this or you don't want to do this, that's fine. I will do it on my computer. You will see what's going on. You will get the gist of what's happening. So you don't have to do these first 3 labs, but you'll find it to be pretty helpful. So here in Lab 1, if I go down here, it says, before you begin, download the file, Apache Access, a log/tutorial/text. Now, for those of you on a Windows machine, I think if you just click on it, it will then want to download it. For those of us on a Mac, we are going to send this link to my devices. There you go. There we go. I want to save link as. So I want to save link as, and I want to then download this. And I don't care where you download it to, but put it someplace. I'm going to put it on my desktop. Eventually, we're going to move it, so not a problem. It's a very small file. That shouldn't take you long to download. It's downloaded. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to install a collector. So in a few minutes, I'm going to get into the conversation about collectors and whether, how we set them up and how we do them and all that stuff. But just to save some time, if you and I go into our Sumo Logic environment and to install a collector, that's under Manage Data. So here under Manage Data, there is a section called Collection. And up here in the upper right-hand corner, it says we can add a collector. Now, I will show you a hosted collector in just a few minutes, and I'll walk you through that. But you all are going to install, if you want to, a collector on your computer. And that's going to be an installed collector. Hosted collectors are only available if you're on the cloud. Installed collectors if you have a physical machine. So when I click on installed collector, you'll see that I have a couple different flavors of Linux. I have a couple of flavors of Windows, and I hope you're all, if you're on Windows, you're on at least a 64-bit machine by now. You'll also see here I've got a Mac OS and Intel. I don't have the M1 chip yet. And then there's also a binary package for those of you running on Unix and other things. So what we want you to do is pick your operating system and go ahead and download that collector. Again, it's not a particularly big file. It shouldn't take too long to download. But if those of you having, download speed issues, I wanted to make it easy for you.
Hey,
Now,
John, quick question. Why
Yes.
add collector is grayed out when I try to click on it?
Yep. Well, if you look down, okay, if you open up the navigation panel, who are you logged in as down here?
It does say training analyst with the number I chose.
You want to be training admin with a number.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I missed
So
that
log
part.
out of there. And again, to log out, you simply click on it and you sign out. And then you log in. You want to be a training admin. And that's
Sorry.
actually correct. That's why the accounts you've been using for the last 2 days don't have this privilege. And we'll
Sorry.
talk about privileges and roles and all that good stuff. So
It's West Coast here. I'm still waking up. Apologize.
no problem. No problem. I'm not awake yet either. So I got you. And by the way, I promise you, if one of you did that, probably 2 other folks in the class probably did that too. So they appreciate you asking. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. That's fine. And again, no offense, we've trained you for the last 2 days to log in with one account, and now we're changing it up a little bit. Okay. Now let me, while we're doing this, let me get in here and start serenading you with a little story about collectors. So how do we get data into Sumo Logic, right? How do we do high-level data flow? Again, we normally do this data collection phase where we set up our collectors and our sources. And then once we get data coming in here, then we can search and analyze, visualize and monitor and all that good stuff. And that was yesterday and the day before's classes. We really got into the searching and analyzing, visualizing and monitor. This focus is going to be all about data collection. So I love this statement. The journey to 10,000 logs begins with a single collector. We have 2 types of collectors, installed collectors and hosted collectors. If you're on the cloud, you would choose a hosted collector. And I'll show you in a minute. I'll open up a hosted collector here and I'll show you how it looks, how to configure it, all that good stuff. But if you're on on-prem equipment, like I'm on a Mac here, then I need to install a hosted collector. If you're on a Windows machine, you need to install a hosted and installed collector, excuse me. And then of course you can search and analyze, and then you can visualize and monitor. And again, that's conversations we had yesterday. I'm going to leave that go. Now, the question here is, about this hosted collector, these installed collectors. So if you're on the cloud, if you're on AWS or you're on Azure or you're on Google Cloud Platform, or you're doing things like, multi-factor authentication from Okta or whatever, all we really need is the URL for that information of where that area is. And then we need an account that's going to give us access to those log data. That's all we really need. In fact, if I stop the slides here for just a second, and I'm going to do this, I don't want you to do this, just watch. If I say add collector and I click on hosted collector, all it really wants me to do is give this collector a name. Maybe I'll call it JWM, hosted collector. And then it really, doesn't want much. It simply wants to know a description. If I can put it in or leave it out. If I want to specify a category, remember a source category, I can do that. You'll find when I create a source, I can add various fields and metadata tags. So I might want to create a field like business unit, and then maybe this is this hosted environment is by my finance folks. So maybe I'll charge them back or something. I can search by these fields and metadata tags. I can also, if I create some indices and budgets here, I can assign this to a particular budget. I'll talk more about that later. And then I can specify what time zone I want to use when I create my log files. So creating a hosted collector is not a big deal. You're just filling out some information there. It's when we get around to creating a source. And if you don't mind, this right here is a hosted collector. If I wanted to add a source and I pick the source that I want. So am I doing Office 365, Google Cloud Platform, AWS? What kind of stuff here am I dealing with? And here is where we're going to ask you for things like, where is this thing? What region is it in? What credentials? We need some credentials here. How do we access this? And stuff like that. So setting up a hosted collector is not hard as long as you have the information that you need. Okay, and we're not going to set up a hosted collector here at all. All right, so that's the conversation about hosted collectors. Again, if you don't have a hosted collector, if you're on-prem, you can install a collector on each and every one of the machines that you want to grab logs or metric data from. Or you can install a consolidated installed collector and then have these machines forward their logs to this machine. And again, the collector's job is to encrypt, compress, and send. That's what it does. So it's going to take the logs, compress it, encrypt it, and send it to the Sumo Logic cloud so that you can then write queries against it. Now, again, installed collector, installed on a system or within your deployment. It basically is going to encrypt, compress, and send. By the way, these installed collectors are really little lightweight Java applications. They typically take up less than 1% of your memory, less than 1% of your CPU. Hosted collectors are hosted by us. There's nothing you have to install. There's nothing you have to configure. You just basically fill out some information and that's that. Okay. Now, how many collectors do you need? All right. You could set up a consolidated installed collector. And so if you do that, again, you can do that if you run a very high bandwidth network or you have high logging levels. Hang on a second. Yeah. So you're basically going to forward all the logs to one machine. And again, you got good bandwidth. Okay. If you are running more than 500 separate files, 500 separate log files, then we recommend you start adding more collectors, maybe putting a collector on more than one machine so that you break this down to less than 500. If your systems that you install these collectors have memory or CPU limitations, for example, if you install this on a database server, you know, probably not a great choice, but that's going to be probably locked up with your memory and your CPU. Probably not an ideal platform to install the collector on, but you could if you're, constrained by what machines and stuff you have. Also, you may install collectors if you're geographically separated, right? You're in regions, I've got the European region, I've got the US region, the US East region, things like that. Also, if you expect your combined logging levels from a collector to be greater than 15,000 events per second. So if we're getting more than 15,000 log messages per second, we need to probably think about more than one collector. Now, again, you can install one installed centralized collector and have these logs, these machines feed their logs or metrics to this. And again, it will encrypt it, compress it, and send it. Or as I said, you can install collectors on each and every machine. And again, this will collect your log data as well as your metric data. Both these collect the logs and metrics. Okay, so if you're doing cloud collection, right? And again, we're on the cloud, we're doing cloud. So here's some of your source types. I'm doing S3 buckets. I'm grabbing HTTPS stuff, maybe Akamai, Lambda, various other systems, Office 365, Okta, CrowdStrike, a whole bunch of these systems. I would do this. Again, these are hosted by Sumo Logic. There's nothing you have to install. They're basically agentless. So if you're on the cloud, this is what you would use. Local data collection. Here you would install a local collector on each and every machine. Okay. And so here maybe you're going to grab your event logs from Windows or various other logs that you might want, your Docker logs, your firewall logs, things along those lines. Good news, again, requires no extra hardware, gives you direct access to your logs, right? Easy to troubleshoot because there's a bunch of log folders and stuff in there we can look at. Does require these machines to have connections to the internet. Okay, so if your machines don't have connections to the internet, then we may want to think about the third slide that's going to come up, which is a consolidated installed collector. Okay, it does require us to install this collector, and the good news is you can actually do it programmatically through an API, and we'll talk about that. And as I said, it's going to take maybe about less than 1% of your computer memory and 1% of your CPU. So it's not a heavy footprint. So again, if you got a large number of target hosts and stuff that you want to get in here, you're going to probably install a collector on each and every one of these. got a lot of traffic, a lot of log data you want, going to do that. Here's that centralized data collection. So I'm going to install one machine, have the other machines for their logs here. So again, same scenario, operating systems, custom applications, my Windows event logs, things along those lines. The advantages of doing this way is those machines don't necessarily have to have outbound internet access. And also, we typically see customers doing this when they're leveraging their existing logging infrastructure. So maybe they've worked with a competitor of ours or whatever, and they want to basically mimic what they have for that other system, where they've got a centralized data collection. They can do that here. One thing, it does require, in theory, dedicated hardware. So you should have a system that's doing nothing but processing logs. I would say that that's probably not very practical. So you may take like your web server, and on your web server, they'll set it up for a centralized data collection. Also, there is no failover and things like that. So if that machine goes down, we're not going to be getting logs for a while. Okay. If I am doing the local data collection and one of my collectors fails or one of my systems goes down, I'm still getting logs from the other systems. So I want you to be aware of that. And I see we've got a question here. Tom asks, we can constrain the internet access by destination. Yes, you can. Yes. Good question, Tom. Yeah. And we'll show you that in just a little bit. Okay. Actually, let me go ahead and mark that as answered. All right. Also, not only can you collect logs, but you can also collect metric data. And these metrics can come in a couple different formats. Carbon 2.0, Prometheus, Graphite. Those are the ones that we typically support. And whether you're getting your metrics from your cloud environment or from your on-prem environment, your Kubernetes environment, no problems. We can take care of that. We talk more about collecting metrics and dealing specifically the metrics in the metric mastery class. So not a particularly big deal. But you can also ingest metrics. And actually, we're going to set up a metric source where we're going to start collecting your metrics in this class. So speaking of metrics, you will find that we don't ingest metrics that are more than a week old. So basically from this point forward, or maybe up to a week old, we will receive metrics and we'll be fine. So if you try to bring us a bunch of old metrics, it's not going to take it. We'll just spit them right out. Okay. And you can ingest at a data rate that you want, and I'll talk about that. Now, we talk about this thing called DPMs, data points per minute. This is how we measure and how we charge for metrics. So when you get your contract with Sumo Logic, you're allowed a certain amount of ingestion. That's what we charge it for, ingestion, how much data we ingest. But with that ingestion comes a number of free data points per minute. And ironically enough, a lot of our customers, many of our customers, I will say probably 70% of our customers, do not come close to the amount of DPMs they're allocated. And you can go into your administration account and you can see how many DPMs you have and how many DPMs you're using. So there's that. Additionally, here under retention, when we ingest the metrics, we will ingest that raw data and store that raw data. So it comes in every 10 milliseconds or whatever. We will restore that for 7 days in the raw. And then at 1 minute intervals, we will aggregate it. We will calculate the min, the max, the sum, the average, the count. And we will store that 1 minute resolution for 30 days. And then at 1 hour intervals, we will again do a min, max, average, sum, count, and we'll resolve that and we'll store that for 13 days. I'm sorry, 13 months. So the point is, if you want to go back, say within 6 months, you can do it within an hour resolution. If you want to go back within 30 days, you can do it within a minute resolution. And if you want to go back within 7 days, you can see the raw data points that you have. And so, by the way, this makes a great test question on the metric exam, not so much on this one. So again, when you bring in your metrics and your various information, we have a bunch of metadata tags that we have. So when I create a collector, I can reference it when I create my queries by saying _collector equals, and then the name of that collector. If you don't specify the name of that collector, it will use the host name. We also, when you create a source, you can specify the source name, and we can reference it by that source name. But as many of you know from the previous 2 days of classes, we recommend that you use this field called source category. And we recommend that you use that and you configure that in such a way that we can see our major environment and our minor environments separated by slashes. So I might have something like prod, dev, UAT, whatever. And then underneath that, I might have authentication or web servers or whatever. And then underneath that, under my web servers, I might have IIS or Access or Apache or whatever. And so you can break this down and it makes it easy to search for things. In a few minutes, I'll show you here in our collectors where we can see our sources and where we can see our source categories. As far as naming our source categories, again, our best practices is, again, you're going to take the major assembly, the sub-assembly, and the sub-assembly of that in this type of structure. You may want to break it up by environment. So like prod, UAT, dev, like I mentioned. You could break it out by application names. Do it that way. Break it out by geographic region information. Maybe, your company is spread out across various regions. You can break it out that way. AWS regions, business units. You'll find that you can use this source category, and this is a test question, okay? You can use this source category, obviously, to define the scope of your searches. Source category equals, right? We talked about that. We've done that for the last 2 days. But you'll also find that we can use this source category to be able to index and partition our data. Another powerful little feature there. So this source category can be used to partition and index our data. We can also use this to control who can see what data through our role-based access control. RBAC stands for role-based access control. And we can use the source category tag to specify that a specific role can only see certain data. So if I've got a finance team, I might create a role called finance, and I might, in the finance role, automatically filter what data they can see. There is a link here with regards to good source category, bad source category data. And so if you want some good ideas or some good thoughts here, like I said, this is all there for you to see and enjoy and have a good time with. Let me go ahead and copy this and let me put this in the chat box. All right. I think we're just about done with these slides for right now. Good. Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 labs. First lab is we're going to create a collector, and I'm going to walk you through this process, and I'll talk about all the fun stuff with installing a collector. Then after that, we're going to take that text file that we downloaded, and we're going to install that so we get data from those logs. We're going to simulate having a log here is what we're going to do. We're going to simulate having a log. And then in lab 3, we're also going to bring in your metrics. So these are the first 3 labs that we're going to quickly knock out. And so let's turn our attention here back to our labs. And again, we downloaded, hopefully, our collector. So earlier we went to download the collector package. We went into here. You were all logged in as a training plus admin. You went in here to add collector. You all chose install collector, and then you picked the flavor for the computer that you're currently on. Yeah. And that would then download that collector. Now, so we're going to go ahead and install that collector. And the way we install that collector is I'm going to find where I downloaded that collector. It's right here. And I'm going to open it up. There it is. So I found this downloadable file that I downloaded, and I'm on a Mac. And so here it is. I'm going to double click on it. And it says, do I really want to open this? Yes, I do. I really want to open this. And so it's going to prepare and install and set me up. So I am doing lab 1 where I'm about to install my collector. However, interestingly enough, Apple is pretty security conscious. So if I go into my Apple system preferences, for those of you on an Apple, and if I go into my security and privacy here, bear with me a second. I think we finally fixed this, it looks like. It used to not allow me to install this, okay? I don't know what version of Apple OS you're running, but we used to have an issue where it used to stop right here. And then there's a little button that says, yes, allow this to proceed. This is obviously proceeding. So now it wants my password for my desktop to be able to install this application on my computer. And you can see we take security and passwords very seriously here at Sumo Logic. So now we're installing I've got my setup wizard here. I'm going to go ahead and click next. I've got a license agreement. Of course, I'm going to accept the license agreement. Hit next. And then it's going to install. Now, in my case, I have a previous version installed on here. So in my case, it's going to install the previous version, and then it's going to install this. And so now it says, I'm ready to continue. Click next to connect to the Sumo service. And in my case, I get an error. And this happens all the time. The first time it runs, for whatever reason, it throws an error. So I'm going to tell it to quit, close it up. I don't know why it does this. It just does. Now, if I run it again, it will install cleanly. Okay. So we'll call that a feature. So again, I'm waiting for it to ask me for my password. There it is. And this time I'm going to run through it again. Again, it's going to accept the license agreement. It is going to uninstall. And it's going to reinstall. And this time it will come in nice and clean for me. Now, for those of you on Windows machines, this is going to add this to your control programs, add and remove programs. So it does it nicely through Windows. Now, good. So here I've got a confirmation. It named my collector based on my host name. This is the name of my host, jmeredith-mac. It has a setting here for my collector URL to run as a specific user, all that stuff. If I go in here to advanced settings, here is where I can define this information. What time zone do I want to use? How much CPU target percentage do I want to implement? What URL do I want it to go to send it to Sumo Logic? I can override that default URL. If you're using a proxy, I want to specify my proxy and send it to my proxy server. Additionally, not only will it set my collector, but it will also add my sources. So it will add my sources here if I want to. Now, we're manually going to go ahead and add the sources. Then finally, run as. Now, this product, this application is going to run as root or your administrative user. It's not going to run with my credentials. I could tell it to run with my credentials. And for those of you on a Mac, this creates an interesting problem because Macs are very isolated based on who the user is that's running this. For example, I could put that Apache text file that we downloaded earlier in an area that Jay Meredith can access, me, but root maybe won't be able to access. So when we do that lab 2, we've got to be careful on a Mac where we put it, okay? And I'm going to go with these defaults. I'm going to click next. And again, here's my information. But I believe it was Tom who asked, we can constrain the internet access by destination. And so, Tom, there's the answer to your question. So I'm going to click next. Now it asks me about this logging into Sumo Logic. We need to, remember, we're going to encrypt our data. So we need to have some sort of encryption key here. Okay. And there's 2 ways that you can do this. You can either use a token or you can use an access key. So we go back here to Sumo Logic, go back to Sumo Logic. And by the way, here's our directions. Let me get back to our directions for a second. So here we've installed things, everything ran relatively clean. Now it's asking us about the access key. And to generate an access key, we're going to go into our Sumo Logic environment and we're going to go into preferences. Now, let me get into a little more conversation here. Here in my collection area where my collectors are, my collectors and sources. So these triangle things are my collectors. The stuff underneath them are my sources. And we're setting up a collector right now. You'll notice over here, there's a field called access key. There's a field called tokens. Access key, I can, you can, we can create an access key. And we can use this as many times as we want for as many different collectors as we want. All right. But for some companies, they want to have a single use access key. And for that, we created tokens. And so here under my security tab, so again, under administration, under security, is an area here for all of my installed tokens. And you can, I can, we can create and add a one-use token so that we can use our APIs to install our collector programmatically using this one-use token. So if you want to do something programmatically, you want to use these one-use tokens. By the way, also here in my security tab, I can see all of the access keys throughout my environment. And I could add an access key here. Or if I go into my preferences and you go into your preferences, you'll also see you have the ability to add an access key here. But I would like you to go ahead and go and find this preference area. So again, click on your name down here, click on preferences. Let's click on add access key. And here you get to give your access key a name. I'm going to put my initials here, and I'm going to put something like admin course or whatever. Now, I can, if I need to, maybe I'm blocked by a firewall or something like this, I can add this to an allow list so that if I'm behind a firewall, or I'm not, sorry, not just behind a firewall, but if I'm explicitly not allowed, I can basically create a hole so that you can access the Sumo Logic environment. I'll talk more about this allow list and deny list later. It used to be called whitelist and blacklist, but we're trying to be a little bit more politically correct. Well, I'll come back and visit this in a minute. There's a button here that says create key. When I click on this button, create key, here is my access ID. Here is my access key. This is the only time, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see this access key. You can go back and see the access ID again and again and again, but you'll never see the access key again. So if your company policies say that when you create some sort of access keys, you're supposed to store them someplace, then you better store them, okay? But our security model is we don't want to see this again. So I'm going to take this access ID, I'm going to click copy. It's going to copy it to my clipboard. I'm going to go back to where my installation is, where I'm installing my collector. I'm going to choose access key here, click next, and I'm going to paste this in. I'm going to go back over here, grab my access key. Again, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it right in here. And then I click next, and it's going to try to connect to my Sumo Logic environment. So it's going to try to reach out and connect to my Sumo Logic environment, and it did. We're in good shape. I click finish. My collector is now installed. Over here, I'm going to click done. I don't need to save this anyplace. And there is my access key. Here in my access key, if I click on the pencil to edit it, I see the access ID, but I do not see the access key. All right. So again, and I can delete these and deactivate these if I want. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, in lab 1, takes care of generating our access key and then finishing up our installation. Now, you and I should be able to go into collection, and we should be able to search for your host name. Now, this was my old one right here. In fact, I'm going to take this one, I'm going to delete it. And this is the one I just created. Okay. If I look at it on the tip here, I can see it was created on 11:04 at 10:50 a.m. East Coast time. Okay. So when somebody requests a collector, how do you know which to use? Okay. I guess my question here, Ronald, is somebody request a collector or request to install a collector? Okay. You have to ask them what operating system they have. And then you probably want to guide them through what they're going to call it name-wise. By default, if I don't specify a name, it's going to use your host name. But then you should be able to search for it.
I actually meant like, if they want to install a token or access key,
Gotcha.
how do I know, how do I decide between which one to use, or does it matter?
A token is a one-use usage. An access key can be used more than once. So if you want to programmatically, through an API, create and install a collector, and you can do that, then you're probably going to want to use a token. If you want somebody to create a bunch of collectors, then they probably only want to use one access key and access ID.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So great question. All right. Any other questions? By the way, if I go into our documentation, help.sumologic.com, and I do a search for access key, it talks about here how to set up access key and access key API management. And you can do a search for token as well, and it will get into the issue of whether to use token or access keys. So again, here's the installation tokens, when to use a token, when to use an access key. So just like with all of our classes, there's a lot to talk about here. And so it might be a little easier here to do that. But tokens are designed to be a one-time type thing. Okay. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to lab 2? All right. So lab 2, what we want to do is we want to add a source. Now, for those of you who are on Windows, we would like you to take this Apache Access file, and we'd like you to move it to your temp directory in Windows. For those of you on a Mac, because root has to be able to access this, we also want you to put it to your TMP directory. And getting to your TMP directory can be a bit of a challenge on a Mac. So on your Mac, if you would, bring up your Finder. Okay. And here in your Finder, you have an option that says Go, and I can go to folder. So I'm going to choose go to folder, and I'm going to type in /temp. And it's going to take me to my private temp directory in my Mac. And here, ladies and gentlemen, and by the way, this isn't necessarily the greatest place to put something, because when you reboot your computer, it's going to clean out your temp directory, okay? But you want to make sure you put it into a directory that root can access, because root is the one that's logging in. So here is my file. I'm going to drag this into my folder. Also, additionally, actually, I could rename it just to make it simpler than typing in Apache _access _logs _tutorial. Okay, which is a bit gnarly there. But let me go ahead and copy that. Okay, so I put this in a folder that the root account can access. And that's what we're trying to do here in lab 2. Okay. Now we're going to create an Apache log source. So here in Sumo Logic, in your collector, you have this little option here to add, and you want to add a source. I click add source. And what I want is I want to add a local file that is local to my machine. If it was on another machine, it would be a remote file. And there's other things here that I could select and use. Okay. But this is going to be a local file. And I can call this thing whatever I want. I believe the directions want us to call this Apache logs. Okay. I'm actually going to call it JWM Apache logs. I'm going to put my initials in there, make it easier. And I need to specify the file path. So here I am going to type in /temp TMP /Apache access logs.txt. And then when do I want collection to start? Do I want to specify my source host? If I don't specify, it's going to use my host name. I do, and we do recommend as a best practice that you want to specify a source category. And the directions want us to use as a source category, prod/Apache/access. So I'm going to type in here prod/Apache/access. Again, you can add fields. You can add a field name and its value if you want to add metadata tags that you can search by. So if you want to add additional tags here and be able to write your queries against those tags, you can do that. All right. Now, I'm going after a specific file. Could, instead of going after a specific file, could I go after a file path? Yes, I could. I could say, take everything inside a temp, right? But down here in my deny list, I can say out of that folder, only take, deny. I don't want to take specific log types or specific file types out of there. So here, if you're doing a file path, you can specify what you don't want to take out of that directory. And then yesterday, I know a couple of folks had questions about timestamps. And here's how we enable the timestamps from our log entries and what time zone to use and what time zone format to use. And then also what sort of encoding do we want to use? And then this deals with how we process those logs. Now, something else with regards to processing logs. There's a little section here called processing rules for logs. And I can, you can, we can add a rule. And these processing rules, I can give it a name and I can apply a filter, some sort of a parse regex or parse anchor statement or whatever. And I can say, I want to exclude these messages. I want to include these messages. I want to mask these messages or, do something else. So for example, let's say that I'm getting log messages with credit card information. Do you want to ingest their credit card number? You could write a rule here that says, based on this character match of, 4 characters followed by a dash, followed by 4 characters, followed by a dash, followed by 4 characters. I want to mask out and only see, the certain rules, or I can hash them and it will hash them and create a pseudocode. So you can create these processing rules for your logs. And I'm going to choose not to. But I wanted you to know what's going on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now you'll see that it has created for me my source. It shows healthy. Here's my source category. Now, this little blue button right here, if I click on it, it's going to open up a log search with that information. And right now, I'm not seeing any data. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back 24 hours and I'm going to rerun it again. Now, keep in mind, this does take a little bit of time for it to process my data. So I just installed the source. Let's give it a little bit of time. We'll come back and revisit this, okay? But that's what we would normally do. We would check on it. We would make sure it's ingesting. But again, you got to give it a little time here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is lab 2. Now, in lab 3, and like I said, I'll come back and test it here in a little bit. In lab 3, we are going to bring in some host metrics. So we're going to create another source where we can bring in our host metrics. So we're going to bring in and create another source for our host metrics. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into our Sumo Logic environment, into our collector, find our collector again. This time we're going to add another source to our collector. This time we're going to grab the host metrics. So I'm going to click on host metrics. I'm going to give it a name. My initials host metrics. I could put a description in here. I could specify the source host if I want to. Don't necessarily need to do that, but I would specify my source category. And again, for my source category in here, per the directions, they want us to use prod host metrics. Okay. And again, I could add that metadata tag, the metadata fields and stuff that I want. Now, here's the question. How often do you want me to send metrics? Every 10 seconds, 15 seconds, every 5 minutes? How often? For my case, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to do it every 10 seconds. I might as well get some data in there, okay? And so I'm going to do 10 seconds. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. Here under my metrics, if I expand my CPU, you can see all the different CPU types of metrics that I'm collecting. And these tooltips will tell you what these types are. But I'm going to go ahead and grab all of my metrics. I'm going to select this all stuff. And again, I remind you that we still have this processing rule for metrics. So you can filter out some personal stuff or whatever you want. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And so now I have added my host metrics. And if I go out here where it says my source category, and if I click on this, this is going to open this up in my metric query. And now the reason I'm seeing all this data for 15 minutes isn't because there's like a lot of old data in here. I had a prod host metrics collector created. So this is not necessarily showing me my new information. Let me go ahead and refresh it. And there we go. Now that I've refreshed it, because my old collector just got trashed because I installed the new collector. So now it's showing me my data here. And I can change this time frame. This, by the way, is your metric query builder. And I can start seeing my data as it's coming in, all my various metrics. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is lab 2. I'm sorry, correction, that is lab 3. Now, there's one other thing with lab 3. They suggest that we install the host metric app. And as many of you know from our fundamentals class, we've got a whole bunch of applications in our app catalog. One of those is our host metric app. We also have a host and process metric app now too. But you could, I could, we could install and add this to our library. The only thing is, when we add it to our library, we have to specify our source category, prod/host metric. Now, I've actually already installed this. So if I go in here, just bear with me a second, I close this up. If I go in here, I believe I have host metrics. And so I can use this host metrics to see the performance of my host metrics. Now, keep in mind that when you specify your host, when you install this app and you specify your source category, right now, this is looking at prod/host metrics. So if any of you also use prod/host metrics, I would see your metrics in here as well. If you all used a unique name, then I could add a host metric app and specify your name and see your host metrics. So, you know, the data is being ingested in. Now we can use these applications and specify the proper source category, or I can use global wildcards in my source category to see more than one system. I could say, I want to see host metric / or prod/star, and I can see everything. So it's a matter of what data you want to ingest. Does that all make sense? Any questions? Okay, so that takes care of lab number 3. And this is probably an excellent point for us to take a little bit of a break. So if you don't mind, let's take a 10-minute break and we will resume here when my counter gets down to 0. So let's take a break and I will talk with you all in about 9 minutes and 53 seconds. Have a good break. Hey, folks, this is John. Hopefully you guys are all back from break and ready to go. A question was asked earlier about, again, getting the recordings for this class. And one of your classmates pointed out to me that when they took this previous week's sessions, classes or whatever, previous sessions, in about 2 days after the session, they received links to the recording of the class. So you all should start getting links to the classes that you were in Tuesday and or Wednesday and or today. So you should get those in a couple of days. Again, as I said, if you don't get them, and again, you might want to wait till probably Monday. If you don't get them, let me know and I will send you the link myself. But this should be an automatic function, and I do need to give our operational staff some time to to do this. Okay. So hopefully that answers the question that was asked earlier, and all is good. So far we have set up collectors, we have set up sources. Now let's talk about some other administrative things that we do here in Sumo Logic. So I want to talk a little bit about optimization and how we can make things better, faster, quicker, easier. As far as optimization tools, there's really two main categories. There are field-based optimization tools, and there are index-based optimization tools. As far as field-based optimization tools, there is these field extraction rules. And what they'll do is when we ingest data, they will parse out certain fields. And then you will see those fields in your field browser. So let me stop for a second. Let me go out here. Let me go into let me go into manage data. Let me go into logs. And here in my logs is where my field extraction rules are. Now, we're going to talk about all these little tabs here, just so you know. But I can, you can, we can create a field extraction rule. We can give it a name, right? Whatever I want to call it. And then do I want to do this at ingest time or when somebody runs a query? More than likely, you want to do it in ingest time. And then we can specify what data that we want, right? For example, I might grab a metadata tag here, like source category, and I only want to deal with, say, my Apache access logs, right? So I can go out here and grab my Apache. So you're filtering for what data. So any data that comes from this source, I am going to do something with. I am going to field extract it. Now, we know all kinds of different logs, right? We know Akamai, we know Apache, we know AWS, various logs, so forth, so on. So we have a series of templates. And so you can use that template if you want to, and here is the template. And what this template does is it's going to do a parse regex, regular expression. Those of you in class yesterday learned a little bit about parse regex. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to extract out these fields for me. But maybe I don't want these fields to be called maybe source IP. Maybe I want it to be called client IP. So I'll call it client_IP. And you'll notice that down below it changes this to client IP. Now, there's two benefits to doing this. If I do these field extraction rules, that when a user goes in and they do a log source from that source, they will automatically see those fields down here in my field browser. So just bear with me a second. Oh, I know why. Let's grab the right stuff here. Sorry. App/Apache/access. There we go. So when they run this query, they'll see all these fields. These fields are because of field extraction rules, and they can use these fields and they can leverage these fields and they can do all kinds of neat stuff with this. So this is part of our optimization as far as using these field extraction rules and the field browser. Now, there's a second side benefit to this. And that is when you use field extraction rules and you name things, you're setting up a defined name, a defined vocabulary, right? From now on, we're always going to call this client IP, and that's the way it's going to be called. So if somebody writes their own query and does their own parsing, and they call it source IP, and somebody else calls it, hosted IP or whatever, this way we get every down to the same vocabulary. And so you start creating some standardization here. And that's another benefit of doing these field extraction rules. Okay. Okay. Tom asked a question. We can constrain the internet access by destination for the local installed collector. Tom, as I mentioned before, when you set up your collector, you define where that output's going to go. There was a URL setting in there. And so, yes, that's how you can do that. Also, if you're going through a proxy, you can specify the proxy settings. I assume that's the question you're asking here. So when you set up your collector, that's how you define that. Does that answer your question? Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm sorry. My apologies. I was at the wrong tab there. Sorry. We already talked about that. Can field extraction rules, Tom, here's your other question. Can field extraction rules have an impact on pre-existing installed apps? Right. Typically, no, because once you do a field extraction rule, it's from this point forward that those rules take effect. So, gotcha. So the answer to your question is no, they typically won't have an impact on your pre-existing installed apps or dashboards. They will apply from this point forward. Now, if I use the same field name or the same field source as an existing dashboard, it may, but probably won't, because again, field extraction rules apply from the point you set them up, define them, and then save them. That's when it starts to happen. Okay. So good question, Tom. Thanks for asking. All right. While we're here, by the way, anything I do with any field anywhere, whether it's from a field extraction rule or whatever, will be listed here under fields. So here I can look at a field. I can see, did it come from my field extraction rule? Did it come from role-based access control? Is it being used in the partitions? Where is it being used? So I can see my fields that are specified here and where they are being used. Again, my field extraction rules, here where I create those. And here I have a section here for parsers, and we can add a parser here, a parser configuration to parse out some of our messages and to do some parsing some logs if we want to. This is something fairly new, and I haven't had a chance to really play with it yet. So I'm not sure if I can see the full value of it. Also partitions. You can, I can, we can partition things. So back to my slides here for a second. One of the other optimization things that we can do is we can create partitions. We can break up our data into various partitions. And obviously, the smaller the partition, the faster the performance is going to be, right? And I can also create scheduled views. These are my two index-based optimization tools. So let me go to my partitions. Typically, when you partition your data, you don't want to make sure there's no overlap in your data. By the way, there's some great test questions that come from this slide. And you always want to make sure you have less than 20 different partitions. So you can break up your data however you want to. Maybe you want production data or dev data, or maybe you want to break it down by business unit, whatever. Maybe you want your finance data in a separate partition. So you can also apply security to it. We'll talk about that. But again, there should be no overlap of your data across partitions, less than 20% of your partitions, and ideally between 1 and 30% of your total volume. If it's 98% of your volume, there's nothing gained there. You don't gain any performance, right? And then you want to group the data that's searched together the most. And when you create these partitions, you can customize the retention, how long you want to keep that data. Okay. Gabriel, I'll answer your question here in just a second. So let me go back to partitions, and then I'll come back to Gabriel's question. So in my partitions, I can, you can, we can create a partition. We can also assign it in a data tier if you're an enterprise customer. And this is typically, you get so much space and all that fun stuff for continuous tier and frequent tier and infrequent tier. We typically charge by these tiers. but you can define your retention expression, and then you can also define how long you want to retain this data. So for example, if it's data that I continuously ingest, but it's data of the, is perishable or should have a short life, I can say, I want to keep it for maybe 60 days. This is for troubleshooting and stuff like that, immediate troubleshooting. But maybe if it's something that I'm going to look at over the last several years that I'm required to keep by law, then maybe I want to make it an infrequent and I want to retain it for 7 years. So you can define the partition you want. You can also forward that data to another source if you want to store it. You can store it on Sumo Logic, but keep in mind that we're going to charge you for it. So you can forward it if you want to here under data forwarding. You can create a data forwarding source like an S3 bucket or something that you can put it to. And therefore it's not going to, we're not going to charge you for that. You can store it there and then re-ingest it back in if you want to be able to reread the data and see what's going on. Okay. Now, before I get into scheduled views, let me go back to Gabriel's question. Gabriel's question is, I understand the concept of field extraction rules, but don't understand how they improve performance. Well, they improve performance 2 ways, Gabriel. When I use field extraction rules, that means these fields are available immediately for my users. So they don't have to write their own parsing statements. And they can then select the fields that they want to here and basically see and use this stuff without having to write any elaborate queries. So it saves time. And it also makes it easier to find things because they are already pre-parsed. So it already knows what source IP is. It already knows what URL is. And so that makes things much faster for me. Yeah. So hopefully, Gabriel, that answers your question.
Okay. I thought you were talking about performance in terms of getting faster results.
Understand. You're thinking about, milliseconds versus seconds. Speed.
Okay.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you. So thank you for asking. All right. Now, back to my logs here for a second. Scheduled views. Scheduled views are really kind of neat. Scheduled views, and basically what a scheduled view is, it's a query that you write that automatically runs in the background every minute. And so you can create a scheduled view, could be a very complex query, and it will automatically run it in the background every minute in the system behind the scenes. And then if you want to see what that scheduled view does or its performance or whatever, you can simply run that view. So bear with me a second. Let me go back here. Let me find my scheduled views here. Let's see. This one's storage is about 9.6. This scheduled view here. So what I can do, actually, no, that's not what I want. Sorry. I'll tell you what, I'm going to take this one here, Apache logs. I can go in here and I can say underscore view equals. That's a metadata tag. That's going to specify my scheduled view. And then over here, I can name that Apache logs in this case. And in this case, when I run it, the results are going to be pretty instantaneous because the information's already been cached. Now, I'm not getting any results back here. Let's see if I go back here to last 7 days, see if I get any data. There may not be anything in that scheduled view. So let me see if I can find a better. Let's take application usage. Application usage, there we go. And let's run that. So the performance on this, even though I'm going back 7 days, was pretty quick, 3 seconds. And the reason is this query automatically runs about every minute in the background and updates and appends. So you can use scheduled views to improve your performance in seconds, right? And making the performance much, much easier and much, much more effective.
Is there a cost associated with having numerous scheduled views?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
Just as a gotcha that I ran into, worked with support on, and this might help everybody. That's why I'm bringing it up. And maybe it's been fixed, but this has been recent, and that's with scheduled views. You must use the time slice at least at 1 minute. If you don't do that in your view, then the time on there is skewed. So I had a lot of instances where I needed to use the timestamp, and it was skewed a lot. So the fix was that in your query behind the view, you must use the timestamp 1 minute, and that fixed the problem that I was having. So just kind of a gotcha if you're noticing that you have to use the timestamp for things and you're seeing that there's some problems. Like I said, I don't know if that's just been recently fixed, but that's been my experience. I opened a ticket with it and just wanted to bring that up.
I have not heard of that ticket's been closed. I have not heard of that ticket, to be honest with you, Ronald. But I appreciate you sharing that. So again, when you create your schedule view, you need to make sure you put a time slice operator to keep everything in the buckets, if I understand that correctly. Is that right, Ronald? When you create your schedule view,
yeah, the time slice, exactly, in the query that's behind it. Yeah,
right. So again, when I go in here to logs and I create a view in my query, I'm going to put the time slice operator and at least 1 minute buckets. So that's good. No, I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, for some reason, if you don't do that, I was doing stuff based off of by hour and by minute, and the results were I was collecting sums, totals.
Okay.
And I wanted them by hour. So total of data usage by hour, and my numbers were wrong. And I was able to prove that the data showed that when I did it manually, it looked right, but the scheduled views look wrong. And they finally told me that that's because I didn't have a time slice in my query. And when I put that in there for 1 minute, it has to be, I think, at 1 minute. For some reason, Sumo underneath the engine needs to have that in there to put it into the view correctly. So they explained it to be somehow like that, but hopefully, I had a lot of headache trying to figure out what this.
I'm sure you and Sport worked together on this and went through a lot of.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted just to bring that up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's good stuff. Thank you. So again, you can create schedule views, and that will improve your performance as well. And I believe that takes care of all of these lovely tabs up here. The metrics, again, we talk about this metric stuff in the metric mastery class, but in here we can parse out in different metric formats. We can also convert our logs to metrics, and we can also transform various metrics if we need to. So for example, if you want to create a metric to calculate maybe shipping fare or shipping weight, you can take a metric that says, here's its weight times a certain rate, and create a kind of a metric that way. So again, we talk about that in the metric class. I'm going to come back to this monitoring section, and we'll talk about that ad nauseam. And then also here under administration. So here in administration, and forgive me, I'm kind of deviating from the slides a little bit because the slides don't go into a lot of this detail. Okay. Under administration here, under account, here is your Sumo Logic account information. So here is your organization ID. This is what makes you different from another Sumo Logic customer. It's your unique ID. Here is my contract period. Here is my plan type. I can see what my utilization is. If I'm on a credit model, how many credits I've consumed, that sort of thing. I can see a forecast of how many credits it expects me to consume to make sure I don't go over budget. I can see in the case of I'm using those tiers, those continuous tiers and frequent tiers, infrequent tiers, I can see that, again, how I'm doing on that. Because again, we charge probably by the different tier levels if you're an enterprise customer. Now, one little thing, somebody asked the question of earlier, if I use scheduled views and stuff like that, does it count against me? No, it doesn't. But one little thing that does count against you is if you use the infrequent tier and you write queries against that infrequent tier, there is a charge for that. So the continuous and the frequent aren't a problem. You can run as many queries as you want. The infrequent tier is something that we typically do charge against. And again, this is something to talk to your account team about. Me and the account team have an understanding. They don't teach classes, and I don't try to sell product because things may change and all that stuff. So I don't want to mislead anybody. So you can see an overall snapshot here of your environment, your health, that sort of thing. Here under users and roles, we use an RBAC control system, role-based access control. So when you want to add a user, you simply go in here, you type in a first name, a last name, and an email address. And then you get to assign it a role. Okay. And you can assign it as many roles as you want. Now, these roles, if I go in here and I create a new role, again, I get to give this role a name and a description. And as I mentioned before, you can use something like source category, and you can automatically filter this so that if somebody's a member of a role, then we can automatically filter their data. So I might say something like labs/finance, and maybe this is my finance role. So anybody who is a member of finance will only be able to see finance data. They can't see anything else. In fact, nobody else can see finance data, okay? And then here you decide what capabilities, what privileges you have. Earlier, when somebody logged in as an analyst and wasn't having the ability to add a collector. So here you can view collectors, you can add collectors, you can manage ingest budgets. These are the various privileges that you have. And then also here, you can do with entity configurations, managing your entities, your metric information here, various security within Sumo Logic. So if you want to be able to add a SAML, stuff like that, you'll see that. By the way, many of you, if you look at your administration area, you won't see as much information. You don't have those permissions. I do. I wanted to show them to you. Dashboards, again, share dashboards with the world, share dashboards with the allow list. The allow list I will talk about in just a little bit, but it basically says, if I put your dashboard on the allow list, that means that you're coming in from a specific IP address or a range from IP addresses, and you don't have to authenticate to be able to see that dashboard. So for example, if you got shareholders and stockholders, and you want them to be able to see dashboards that you have in Sumo Logic, without them having to log in, you could put them on the allow list. Again, there's a privilege here to manage your users and roles. There's a privilege here as far as our monitoring, which I'll come back to and visit. And then down here in the Cloud SIM Enterprise, those of you who are into Cloud SIM, this has now been moved into Sumo Logic. It used to be in the Cloud SIM product. So here, in order to be able to see the option to view Cloud SIM Enterprise, we're going to check mark that. And then we can let you have control of what insights and things you can do with insights in that product, what content and how you can manage content, whether you can create rules and other things, and then various configuration options. So you can, I can, we can create as many rules as we want, and then we can assign those users to those roles. And I can see here very quickly how many different users are assigned to these roles, and I can click on it and I can see who those users are. Okay. Now, you all are part of a role called the training admins. And so you're part of the training admin role, and then you can see your permissions based on that role. The accounts are logged in right now. We also have a training analyst role that also is used for the training analyst stuff that we do. So, again, you can create as many roles as you want to, add your users to those roles. If a user is a member of multiple roles, it's basically the union of their permissions. So if they got permissions from one and don't have permissions to the other, it's typically the union of those permissions. The exception to that is when I apply that source category search filter, that becomes the more restrictive of the two. And so that will filter what they can see. So that's RBAC security. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. If for some reason you have a user who forgot their password or whatever, you'll find that when they log in, there's an option in there when they log in that says, I forgot my password, and it should send them an email with a new password to be able to recover it. but you can, as an administrator, you can reset their password here, and it will fire off that email, get them to change that. You can change their email if you want to. You'll find that for an individual user, you can decide if you want to enable or disable two-step verification. I'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. Of course, you can edit the account, delete the account, deactivate the account, whatever it is you want to do. One very important thing, if you delete users, it's going to ask you, what do you want to do with their stuff? What do you want to do with their personal folder? And so hopefully within your company, you've got a policy that says when somebody leaves the company, we are going to move their stuff to their boss or to a content graveyard or whatever your policy is. But when you do delete an account, it's going to ask you, what do you want to do with their personal folder stuff? And so think about that. Now down here under security, you'll see I've got a bunch of tabs. If you're using Sumo Logic authentication without any other security type thing, multi-factor authentication or nothing else, then here's your password policy. How often does the password expire? Passwords can be reused, what your password rules are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Also, there's a setting in here about remembering your browser. So if you want to enable your session cookies, you can do that. And again, it's going to remember that ID information for 30 days. Here on the service allow list settings, there's two ways to do this. I can enable login API allow list. So if I check mark that, these IP addresses can come in and access the system without having to authenticate in. If I say enable dashboard allow list, then on that dashboard allow list, these IP addresses can access some specific dashboards. And when you create your dashboards and the properties of those dashboards, you will basically define that you want to use them for certain allow lists. So in here, when I share this, I can, hang on a second here, see this URL, and I can make this dashboard available to outside of my organization, basically put it on that allow list. So that's where that gets controlled. I mentioned earlier, and by the way, I'm sorry, here, let me go back. Here's an IP address, here's an IP address, here's an IP address, here's a CIDR. So this is an IP address along with a range of a subnet mask. So this is a range of IP addresses. So these folks can come in and access dashboards. As far as access keys, I mentioned to you before that you and I can create access keys to create collectors. One access key can be used multiple times. And even in here, you cannot, I cannot, we cannot see the access key again. I can see the access ID, but I can't see the access, cannot see the access key value, okay? Also over here, we have our installation tokens. So here's where you can do a one-time type token. If you want to install a collector using an API, you can use and embed the installed token into that, and it's good for one use. If you want to set up some secondary authentication providers or other authentication providers, here's where you would do that, here in the SAML area, okay? And then last but not least, here's our policies. Now, these policies here, again, do I want to enable my audit records for my account? You will find that, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, we have an application here called Audit. And it's part of our application catalog, and you can install Audit. In order for Audit to work and to have data and for these dashboards to populate to where I can see what users are doing, what things, this, excuse me, this policy has to be enabled. This allows my audit records to be available to this application. Okay. And then this one allows me to search my audit records for my account. So I may want to use the dashboard, but maybe I want to create some customized searches and stuff like that. This one gets checked. Now, if you have a problem with Sumo Logic and you call our tech support folks, we'll gladly help you out. Obviously, we can access the environment, but we can't access as much of the environment as you think. It's protected. It's your environment. It's not ours. And so sometimes we may ask you to go in here and enable it so that we can dig deeper into your environment. And then, of course, when we're done, we're going to ask you to clear that checkbox. But just because we're the providers of the system doesn't mean we have full rights to your environment. And so that's what this checkbox does. Again, do I want to be able to share dashboards outside of my organization so that folks can, it basically enables that switch that allows us to share that data out. And then also, when I look at a shared dashboard, do I want to look at it from the context of the person who created the dashboard or the context of the person who's running the dashboard? Okay. So by default, it's going to look at the viewer's access role. Okay. Otherwise, it's going to look at it based on who the author was and who created it. So depending on whether it's checked or not. Do you want to allow a number of concurrent users per user session? So when somebody logs into Sumo, can they log in once, twice, 3 times, and that's it concurrently? Or can they, unlimited? So you define if you want to restrict concurrent sessions. And then here under user timeout, you can specify a global setting here for, the user session is going to time out in whatever days. Now, every user also has in their own preferences here, their timeout value here as well. So whichever the smaller of the two is the one that gets applied.
Oh, okay, that's, never mind, that answered my question. Whichever's the smaller of the two gets applied.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So there is that. Let me go back to my administration, back to my security, back to my policies, and there we have it. Okay. One other thing here on SAML, you can actually specify if you want, and specify that you want a user to use, 2-factor authentication or whatever. The users can also go into their preferences, and here in their preferences, they can also decide if they want to enable 2-step verification. So maybe people like your administrators and stuff, you want to enable 2-step verification, but globally across the company, you don't want to. So you can either set it globally across the company or individual user by individual user. So that takes care of that. Now let's get back here to the slides. Let's get back here to the, there's two or three things I need to talk about. Monitors is one, content administration is another. So, again, we talked about your account overview information here. By the way, in the account overview information, you were able to see in the past how many DPMs you were allocated. But we changed that interface. Now there's a dashboard that you can use, or if you try to do a log to metric, you'll see how many DPMs you have. Okay, so these slides are a little bit out of date. Again, you can add certain applications. In fact, we're going to talk about 2 apps. The data volume app. The data volume app lets you see what data you're holding here by category, by source, by whatever. So the data volume app I actually have installed on here. So if I go in here and I look for, close this up, there's my audit app. I'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. Here's my data volume app. So here I can see how am I doing on my capacity utilization, how many ingest and stuff I have, how many DPMs I have, how many DPMs ingested I have, what's my utilization capability. I can look at my logs, I can look at my metrics, I can look at overview of my data here as far as how much stuff I'm ingesting and all that. This application is part of our app catalog. You can install it. We recommend you install it. In fact, there's going to be a log lab for you to install it. Okay. So that's your data volume app. And then the other app, like I said, is your audit app. Your audit app shows you who's doing what on your environment. What sort of things are they doing? Also, it lets you see, people logging in, where are they logging in from, when are they logging in from, any issues, unsuccessful login attempts, password reset attempts, all of that good stuff. I can also see specifically what my administrators are doing here as well. What sort of actions are my administrators seeing? And as you can see, over the last 24 hours, we haven't done much. Okay. So those two apps are very handy, and those will save you some time. And sure enough, there's going to be a lab here for you to install those. You can also install some ingest budgets if you want to. Actually, I think ingest budgets have kind of gone away in view of the partitions. So let me just not talk about that, let that go. Health monitor, this is also something that's changed. And so you can, as an administrator, or even maybe as a user, if you have the privilege, you can go in here to manage data and here into monitoring. Now, in monitoring, you can, if you want to, create and put things in a folder. So you can create folders to organize your environments. Maybe you got a bunch of AWS environments and you want to organize the monitors of those AWS environments in those folders, right? You can organize that stuff. That's what we're trying to show you. Now, you can also create monitors. And so when you create a monitor, you're specifying that this is going to be either a log query or a metric query. And if it's a metric query, I can either use static query, or I can also define an outlier here, okay? And so you define the criteria of this, you define the actual query. So for example, here, I'm going to do something like source category equals lab/Apache /access. And then I'm going to add a new line pipe count by status code, just something to get me some data here, okay? And I'm not seeing any data. Why? Okay. Oh, I see now. I get you. Hold on. This again. Yeah. And I can trigger on status code. I can trigger on count. I can trigger on whatever I want. And what I should do here is it should get some results. And then, and actually, I know what's going on here. I changed this to outlier. That's what's throwing me off. There we go. So when I go back here to static, I can trigger on what I want to do here. Return to account, count, whatever. And I can define here if I'm missing data to notify me. Not only notify me if I'm missing data, but notify me when we recover and we get data back. Okay. So you can define that. You can also set up warning levels. So let's say this is my CPU utilization. All right. I could say, you know what, I want to set up a warning level if my CPU utilization is probably close to 80%. Now, in this example, 80 is going to be way too high. Okay. So I really, to make this more practical for this observation, I may make this 1.5. Okay. Based on the numbers here. And so yeah, I want it to alert me. Oh, I'm sorry, 1,500. Sorry. There we go. So this is my warning area. If something happens, I'm sorry, this is my green area. This right now is my warning area, anything above 1,500. And then I can define my critical area. I want it to notify me if I get above, say, 200,000. So here I can see my green area. Here I can see my warning area. Here I can see my alert area, my critical area. And then down here, you can decide once these things happen, what do I want to do? Do I want to notify you via email? Do I want to tickle your pager? Do I want to use Slack, Microsoft Teams? Where do I want to do this? How do I want to communicate with you? Okay. And then you define the various conditions. I'm missing data, I recover, a warning, recovery. And if I want to, I can add other notifications in here. You know, maybe I want to notify my ops team and via an email message. Maybe I want to also fire off a pager duty message to some folks. And so you can, I can, we can create these monitors to be proactive when certain things happen. Now, at any time, you can look at your monitors and you can see what kind of state they're in. So I can see these are critical, these are normal. I can find there's a warning down here. I scroll down far enough. So you can see the state at all times to see what kind of condition it is. And then, of course, the various action that it took. So there is that. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention to you here under collection. I'm sorry, here's where our ingest budgets are. Okay, there we go. So in our ingest budgets, if we want to, we can create budgets. Say we're charging back to some company, some part of our entity, we can specify a budget so that when things start getting close to their usage, to their capacity, we can be notified. So I forgot to talk about that. Also, here's where I can create various archives. And then here's where I can see a status of my collection, of my collector data. The other thing I want to do here real quick is looking for something, I'm not seeing it. Okay, for notification types, is Microsoft Teams something new? I don't know that we have that ours. We do use a webhook. Okay, Microsoft Teams and Slack, in order to get there, they are a webhook. So you have to define a webhook to connect to Microsoft Teams, to connect to Slack, that sort of thing. And so that's what I'm going to try to show you here is where those hooks are and where you define those webhooks. And that's the thing I'm looking for here real quick that I've suddenly mentally forgotten where it is. So if I go in here to monitoring, there we go. Under monitoring, here is where we define our connections. So if you want to make a hook to Slack or you want to make a hook to Microsoft Teams, you would go in here and you would pick what you want to connect to. Now, if what you're looking for isn't listed here, you will simply choose webhook, and then you'll look at the API documentation of where you're going to, and you'll fill out that information, provide the authorization header if you need it, define the custom header if you need it, and define the JSON payload that you need. So this webhook is a generic template that you can use for things. In the case of, for example, here, Datadog, we've taken that generic webhook and we've already determined what the payload is and what the information is here. And so we've already pre-built this for you. Same with Microsoft Teams. Okay, so if you go in here and we go to Microsoft Teams, again, we've provided most of the information here for you based on what we know. So Larry, I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. All right. One last thing I need to do, and then I'm going to turn you loose in some labs, and then we'll get you take the certification exam. One last conversation point here is you're the administrator, which means that you also manage content. So here, ladies and gentlemen, we have a folder, the shared library, and it's your job to manage it. And if you go into this folder tab right here, you can look at it from your perspective, and you can see in this library tab what you have and see things, or you can look at it from the content administrator. And if you look at it from the content administrator, here is where you can modify this. So here I have a folder called admin recommended, and we recommend, we put in here an admin recommended area, and you can add things to your admin recommended area so that when your users go into here, let me go back to my normal mode. When your users go in here, here's my admin recommended area. This is stuff that we want folks to be aware of. And then here's all of my other content from my other users. So you can, I can, we can manage this content. And if I want to take some information here and I want to move it or edit it or change it and move it someplace else or export it or whatever, I can do that. So you're the content administrator here, and you can do that. You can add stuff. You can add new content to this folder if you want to. Now, it also has your users folder. And if I go into, bear with me a second, back to my library, back to my users, here's where I can see all of my users, and I can see what they have in their personal folder. These deleted users will get cleaned out. But here, for example, I can look at what's in John Meredith's folder. I can open it up. I can see all the cool stuff in here. And if I want to here, I can do a little housekeeping, right? I'm the administrator. I can clean some stuff up. So I select the things I want, and poof, I can delete them. And they're all going to be cleaned up and taken care of and deleted. Okay. Of course, it says this operation cannot be undone. So be careful when you go about deleting things. I could go into my boss's folder. In fact, I could just search for his name. And because I am an admin, I could clean up his stuff. He's got 2 folders. Smart man, huh? Okay. So I could clean up this stuff. Okay. So you're the content administrator. You can manage all this. And that's something else we want you to be aware of. Make sure that when you're done, you switch yourself back and put yourself in the normal view so that you can see things. Otherwise, you're going to see things as the content administrator. Now, the last set of labs that we have here are labs 4, 5, and 6. In lab 4, you're going to install 2 apps. You're going to install the audit app if you want to, and you're going to install the data volume app. And I talked about those, the audit app and the data volume app. Now, the other thing I'm going to warn you is that the test that you're going to experience is going to have some questions about the data volume app and the audit app. If you get to those questions and you get stuck on a question, if you haven't installed those, it's not a big deal. Let me know. I will share my screen. I will display the app. We'll figure out what the answer to that question is. Okay. So if you want to install these, you certainly can, and you can install them on your company's environment. Remember that when you install the audit app, you've got to enable the ability to do that auditing. Okay. So I want you to be aware of that. And then lab 5, as I mentioned before, is kind of a weird one. Try simple analytics. Lab 5 wants you to go back and do labs 2 through 6 on the fundamentals course. And again, many of you were with me on the fundamentals course, you don't need to redo those, but we wanted to give you a chance to play with some simple analytics. And that's what lab 5 is. Now, lab 6 is a query here that you could create if you wanted to. And this basically query, if you run it, say, every 4 hours, what it's going to do is it's going to warn you when you get close to your threshold level. Okay. So you could schedule this query to run, and basically it's going to look at things. Now, a couple things. We've arbitrarily decided that a value of 100 gigabytes is your plan size. Well, maybe it isn't here. So you would have to adjust this to whatever your plan size is. And then what we're looking at is we're comparing your volume against your plan size. And again, if your plan, if you're up against a certain value, we will display for you, a message, an alert, a problem, so that you can be aware that you're getting close to your threshold views. Okay. And that's what that is. It's a simple little query that you can use and create. It's a data volume index. Keep in mind that you can also go out here into the data volume app, and you can see, how am I doing as far as ingest, right? And we've even got these, color coded and stuff, so you can basically see what's going on. So any questions about the admin course, ladies and gentlemen?
I have a quick question.
Any questions?
Back in the beginning, you were talking about the different type of collectors, and
I'm sorry, can you increase your volume, please?
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So back in the beginning, you were talking about there were 3 slides about collectors. Can
Yep.
you go back to that first collector slide for a second? I was taking notes and then I think I
Mhm.
just missed the end of it.
This one right here.
I think the one before that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, there you go, Cloud Collector. Yep.
Yes, thank you.
And again, you know how to get a copy of these slides, right?
Yes,
Okay, good.
yes. I just wanted to see it real quick to get the last thing.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, anytime. And then Larry also has a question here regarding installed apps. If Sumo Logic updates improves an app with new features, do we have to reinstall to pick up those? Yes, you do. You do have to reinstall. Yep.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just looked at the audit app on the class account, and it has a whole bunch of features that mine doesn't have. So yeah,
Yep.
that was
Yep.
somewhat of a.
And please keep in mind that we or whoever creates these apps, sometimes it's our partners, we will always try to improve them. But yes, you're going to have to reinstall them. Yep.
Is there a way to get notified about that, or we just need to read the latest news and alerts and all? Because I had no idea the audit app grew a whole bunch of new fun features.
My advice is, do me a favor, send that in as an idea. Because I know that idea has come up before, and I think you're absolutely right to ask the question. There, we need to promote that stuff. And I mean, I know like we send out newsletters all the time with, customer success and everything else. And I think in the customer success one, we do talk about apps that have been updated. And I think in some of the other newsletters we do. But if you're like me, you're so insensitive to emails and stuff like that, I'm not sure how often you're reading that stuff. And I can't say I blame you.
Yeah,
Wrong.
exactly. It'd be nice to see a little red dot next to an app saying, hey, there's an update available or something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I would suggest you put that in as an enhancement, as an idea. So if you feel free, if you want to, you can either send an email to support@sumologic.com and request that idea, request an enhancement, or you can go out to our ideas area and community and you can, put it in as an idea. But it's a great idea. I think you're absolutely right.
Cool. I'll do that. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? All right. So it's the exam time. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you all to log out of the training environment. Why? Because you're logged in as training admin with some crazy number, right? So I want you to log out, and then I want you to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment. So log into your company's Sumo Logic environment with your credentials so that when you log in, you see your name down here in that lower corner. Now, to get to the exam, it's real simple. You're going to click on the house, you're going to click on certification, you're going to click on get certified, this get certified button, and it should take you to our LMS. If it does not, we'll talk about that. You can let me know and I'll talk about that separately. By the way, here in our LMS, we put in the passwords. So if you're ever wondering what the training analyst password or the training admin password is currently, you can go out here and look it up yourself. Of course, you can send me an email, but you can also look it up. In our case, we are taking the administration class. So we're going to click on the administration tile. And then here is the administration self-paced course, the administration exam in English, the administration exam in Japanese. If I click on the administration exam in English, and you do too, you can click on this registration button and boom, you are registered. Took that long. Okay, not long at all. Now, again, something very important, as you've heard me say. So for those of you who are watching and following along, do not click, do not follow me yet. Just watch. Up here in the upper right-hand corner is your profile. This is where we record all of the certification classes that you have passed. You can see your certificate, you can add it to your LinkedIn profile, all of that lovely stuff. Now, I scroll to the bottom, there's a done button that will take me back where I was. When you take this exam, before you start, you'll see it has 30 questions. You're going to have 60 minutes to complete it. Passing score is 75. Again, this is open note, open book, open documentation, open slides. You can even ask your instructor a question, and I will be here to answer those questions. When I click next, and I don't want you to click next yet, when I click next, it's going to take me to the exam, and I can see there's my 1 hour, 60-minute countdown. And as I scroll down and I start looking at the exam, my counter starts. Okay. And it says, which of the following variables is not a valid webhook payload variable? Ooh, didn't talk about this at all. And this is where you're going to have to go look in the documentation for webhook documentation and see what it is. I believe it's num ag results. I forgot off the top of my head. I got to look it up. Question number 2, webhook connections allow you to send alerts to third-party applications that accept incoming webhooks. That statement is true. And anyway, I'm going to go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom, only answering 2 questions. And I am going to submit my answers. And of course, I'm going to fail. The good news is I did get the first 2 questions right. Yay me. But the point is this close course button. If you want to make sure when you take this exam and you pass it, please make sure you click this close course button so that it writes it to your profile. When you take an exam and if you pass it, it does not automatically write to your profile. You must click this button so it adds it to your profile. If you don't click that button, it doesn't get put in your profile. The exam did not happen, okay? And I want to make sure you get credit for passing. If you fail, I don't care if you click the close course button, but I do want to make sure you get credit for if you pass. And again, you can see what questions you got right, what questions you got wrong. You can't see why you got them wrong, but you can at least see which ones you got right, which ones you got wrong. So that's the last of my advice for the exam. Are there any questions, ladies and gentlemen, before I stop the recording, stop my sharing, and I go quiet for a while you all take the exam? By the way, just a friendly heads up, in an hour from now, an hour and 15 minutes, I have another meeting to attend. So I would like you to get to the exam and I'll hopefully get it done here in the next hour. And like I said, about 1:30 East Coast time, I have another meeting I need to attend to. So I will be closing the classroom up at that point. Otherwise, if there are no questions, let me stop the recording. Jeremy, questions, sir?
Yeah, I did this fine the other day, but when you go to the community, go to training, it's not letting me stay logged in. It keeps reverting me to the training one, and I've tried closing my browser, logging out. Everything.
So when you go in here and you click get certified, it's taking you back to the training environment, back to the other environment. Yep.
Yeah.
What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to click on the navigation panel of your environment.
Yeah.
You're going to click on help. You're going to click on community.
Yeah.
And a panel should pop up that says, we want to verify your email or some button on it. If you click on that button, it will then send you an email. And in the body of that email will be a button that you click on that gives you permission to move between environments. That's really what this is. This is a security thing.
Yeah,
We don't
I've
want
already
you to
done
move
that.
between environments without your permission.
I already did that because I completed the training.
It's the same account. If it's the same account in the same environment, you should have still stuck through. If you were in a dev environment, now you're in a prod environment, that's a different environment. So I don't know what your situation is, but it should have, once you do it in one environment, it should stick from that point forward.
Yeah, once I'm on this page, then you click training, right? The page that you're on.
Once you're on this page, you should see a panel that pops up. I don't see it on my screen.
So
That
what's
panel
the
does
step
not jump
after
up.
that?
I did
don't
this some
see the
time
panel-
ago.
Yeah, if I don't see the panel, then the click training, right?
And you should be fine. Yeah, then you should be able to go from your environment here on the home tab, here on certification. You should click get certified, and it should take you there.
Okay, I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong link then. Thank you.
No,
No worries.
just if I could interject, I ran into the same thing and I opened a ticket with support and everything. I was going around in circles. Like, yeah, you can't click on, if you click on training or certification from that community tab, it'll log you out and ask you to log back in again. And you need to do it from your account. It's very confusing.
Nope, that's the one I missed. Thank you very much.
Okay, so you're saying we got to log in, you got to log back in again. That was the problem?
No, the problem is you have to click from the home page of your logged in account.
Okay.
Yeah, so that you can do the certification from there. Because if you click it from the help, then it logs you out. So you have to log back in.
Okay.
Sort of. I just thought I was in the same place. I wasn't. Sorry.
Yep. Kava, and I mispronounced your name, I apologize, but Kava asked how long certifications and material recordings are accessible. It's a good question. Hang on a second. Let me come back here, folks. I'll be right back. Hey, folks, sorry about that. I have somebody coming in here to check my rat traps and bear traps and all that fun stuff to make sure that we aren't getting critters in the house. So that's basically that. So the question was asked, how long are certification and material recordings accessible? If you get that link to the recordings, they typically last about 30 days and then they go away. The ones that we post on the certification site are there until ad nauseum. We make a scratch copy of those. So now, Kanya, if you get the email with the link to the recordings, and if you download the recordings, you'll have it for as long as you keep it. So hopefully that answers your question. The certifications themselves are good. All the certifications are good for 1 year with the exception of fundamentals, which is good for 2 years. So that's how long the certifications are good for. And then the materials and stuff, hopefully that answers your question. So thank you for asking. Any other questions here, ladies and gentlemen? All right, let me stop the recording.